Welcome to The Wonder, exploring perspectives, rituals, and observances of modern, naturalistic, earth-revering, pagan religious paths. Here are your hosts, Yucca and Mark.
Welcome back to The Wonder, Science-Based Paganism. I'm one of your hosts, Yucca.
And I'm Mark.
And this week, we're going to talk about dreams. I actually can't believe we haven't talked about dreams yet.
It is kind of surprising. We were both kind of mystified as to why we haven't done that yet.
Yeah. And I'm quite curious because we've never had this conversation. Not only have we not had it on the podcast, but we haven't had it off of recording either. So I don't know what your thoughts, opinions, experiences with dreams are. So I look forward to learning about that.
I hope they're shocking.
Shocking. Okay. Well, I think a good place to start is definitely with what are dreams, right?
Yeah. And as you say, I don't know whether we'll have a similar perspective on this. I tend to think of dreams as kind of like the brain running a screensaver.
Okay.
Drawing on bits of memory and themes of concern and things that are kind of weighing on your mind, whether it's your conscious mind or your unconscious mind, and then putting together these fantastical sort of stories in an almost random sort of way. There's a lot of random generation in dreams that you can see. So that's what I think. It's the brain doing that and contributes to imagination. It solves problems. You know, we have so many examples of people who have discovered things, waking up in the middle of the night going, aha, I figured it out, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I think it is. How about you, Yucca?
Yeah, your understanding really reflects mine as well. It's something that I haven't dug into research on, right? I don't have a deep understanding of neurobiology. You know, I certainly have read articles here and there and things like that, but it's not something that I've really done a lot of research in. But what you were saying about it being basically our brains just processing stuff, right? Our experiences, putting together ideas, and there being a randomness to it. But I think there's also sometimes parts of it that aren't quite as random, though, because we are trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely trying to figure stuff out, piece it together. And there's definitely there's different kinds of dreams that we can get into, but that sometimes it's just our brain rerunning through the stuff that we're doing during the day, right? And sometimes it's working on, particularly difficult experiences that we had, running through trauma or things like that but I think it's a way that our brains are trying to make sense of what's going on. And it seems like there's something in there tied in with the sleep that we don't really understand a lot of the mechanisms for yet. Right. We know that sleep is really important for us. We know that it evolved really early on because we see it in lots of other species. We see it in very, very different species than us. I remember a few months back, there was an announcement about a scientist suggesting that they had recorded what appeared to be spiders having REM sleep, which is the type of sleep that we have dreams in. That, of course, they're not inside of the minds of these creatures, but that looking at the way that they behaved seemed to match with what we thought other creatures did at the same time that they were going through REM. And so if it is so widespread, there has to be a really important purpose for it.
Right. Well, there's two questions there, right? I mean, the first one is, what's the point of sleep? And we have really not very good answers.
Yeah, we know what happens when you don't get it, though.
Yes, we know that all kinds of things go very, very wrong when you don't sleep. So apparently it's staving that stuff off, but we're not entirely sure why those things go wrong.
Hmm.
So that's still a point of investigation. And then on top of that is this layer of, well, then these dreams happen. And what's that about? I tend to agree that I think it's the brain. Some of it's just random. Some of it's just sort of, rerunning stuff that it's experienced before or imagined before. But some of it is the brain chewing on knotty problems
Hmm.
that that just that aren't easily solved and that are bugging us.
Right. And we should say, before going too much farther, that not all sleep has dreams, and not all
Right.
types of, so there's different stages of sleep, and then there's different types of dreams as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's these sort of surface level ones, and then there's, as we were talking about, the REM sleep, a much deeper, more vivid kind of dreaming. So,
Right. And REM sleep tends to be more narrative as well.
mhm,
It tends to be a story, whereas in lighter phases of sleep, it can literally just be flashes of different kinds of scenes and events that don't really tie together. And even though the story can be very fantastical, there can be a kind of a line that you can draw through it, and then you can try to figure out what's going on there. And
right,
that's part of the age-old human attempt at interpreting what dreams mean.
right. So that's a nice segue into the next section, which is, what do they mean to us?
Mhm. Yeah, and my answer to that is uncharacteristically vague because I tend to have very, kind of concrete opinions about things. But I think sometimes they can be very meaningful in very concrete kinds of ways. They can be telling us something that our subconscious wants us to do or thinks is the right thing to do, or expressing a fear or an anxiety or an anger, something that relates to something real in our lives. And then other times, as I said, it's just screensaver and there may
Mhm.
not be a lot of content there.
Yeah,
um, and part of the trick is differentiating between those categories.
yeah. Well, I think there's a component to dream interpretation that's very popular. You'll find lots of books about it where it has certain symbols mean certain things. And I don't buy that on a universal level. I don't think that when you see a blue falcon flying through a cloud, that to every single person that is going to mean the same thing, because that I think that each person is going to have a different association with those types of symbols. I
Mhm.
think there might be things that specific cultural groups might have certain associations with things. It would be more likely that, oh, well, if you grew up in this particular culture and in this particular religion or something like that, the symbology might be very different to you than it would be to somebody else. And so, what a snake means to somebody who grew up in a Baptist family, there might be some similarities between those people, but not that snakes you mean this, like it's a code that we can translate. Um,
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that there is a lexicon of of things that can be experienced in a dream that have direct correlations like a dictionary. That doesn't has never made any sense to me. And I think it's one of the places where Freud really went off the rails.
yeah.
Um, it just, I mean, there were a lot of ways that Freud really went off the rails, but that was one of them.
Yeah. But with all of that, I think that within our own minds, that there's a lot to be discovered there.
Mhm.
And as you were saying, the trick, figuring out which is which, there's lots of different tools, but a classic one is a dream journal.
Right.
And keeping a dream journal can give you the opportunity to be able to go back through some of the dreams that you are having. Now, for me, and my experiences, dreams fade very quickly
Me too.
unless recorded. Once I write a dream down, I usually remember having that dream. Right? When
Mhm.
I go back through and I reread that journal, I go, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, of course I remember that."
Yeah.
But if I hadn't written it down, it would just be gone. I don't know that every dream is worth writing down. There were times in my life that I wrote everything down, but now sometimes if it seems particularly important to me, I'll write it down, or if I notice that I'm having repeating themes in particular dreams, then I'll write that down and reflect on that.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember my dreams very much. They have to be pretty vivid for me to remember them. And what that has done, among other things, is make a dream journal really difficult for me, because I decide, okay, I'm going to do a dream journal. And then 3 weeks later, when I finally have a dream that's vivid enough to remember, I've forgotten all about the fact that I decided to have a dream journal.
Yeah.
So, that's just sort of a particular quirk of mine. But I say this because many other people also have a very hard time remembering their dreams, or they don't dream in a way that's conscious enough to capture very often. There's nothing wrong with that. It's
Yeah.
just kind of the way we're built.
Yeah, and if it's useful to you, right? It's not, once again, you're not a bad pagan if you don't roll over every morning and record down exactly what it was that you dreamt. It could be useful for you, and maybe not, right?
Yeah. And one of the things that I try to keep in mind when I'm interpreting dreams is that even if the symbols and things that I've captured and I'm trying to interpret were relatively random, that doesn't really matter, because a random symbol set can be very provocative of subconscious discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a tarot deck.
Yeah.
The cards are random, but the symbols on the cards will provoke associations for you because of your particular consciousness
Right.
that can help you to learn things.
And the
So
act of you trying to interpret it is what's going to help you actually figure out what's going on.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have more of an active and available dream life than I do. What sorts of things do you do with your dreams in terms of interpretation?
So there's another piece we're going to get to later on, which is the lucid component. I don't do a lot with the interpretation component unless it's something that is really reoccurring. Like, and there's certain kind of classic ones that people have, of like the falling ones or the this or the that. When I notice there's a couple of them that I have that are in the reoccurring, and when that starts to pop up, it's part of a pattern in my life that I recognize of, ooh, that's that particular area that I really struggle with, that I have a lot of stress around. And when I start getting the dream about it, it means, at least for me, my interpretation has been that I'm not giving it the attention that it needs. By the time it creeps into reoccurring dream territory, I have left it undealt with for too long. So
That
that's,
sounds very reasonable.
yeah. But when it comes to the active dreaming, which we'll come to in a little bit, that's something that's really central in my practice, and a tool that I've used for my whole life.
Mhm.
So, but before we get there, what about for you with the interpretation? I know you said that you don't really remember your dreams that much, but
I don't very often. And so really more what I reach for as I'm waking up and remembering bits and pieces of these dreams, what I reach for is what was the feeling associated more than anything else, because that tells me what's likely to be going on underneath the surface of my day-to-day operation. If there's a feeling of shame or a feeling of fear or a feeling of happiness, although for some reason dreams tend to be more warning and work on stuff that's a problem than they are just sort of celebratory
do
for
you think
me.
that those are the ones you remember because there would be an advantage to focusing on the worrisome, dangerous stuff? Or do you think it
It
is, yeah.
it could be, but I think also what tends to happen is that the more joyous dreams that I have tend to be dreams where I'm lucid and I'm making choices. So, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do find that I can learn a lot just from kind of the vibe of a dream, and maybe some of the more prominent symbols that emerged from that. There have been a few times when I've been killed in dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And those have always been very powerful. And I've interpreted them as meaning, major dislocations or transformations. Sometimes they've come at times in my life when I was in a major transition. And so that kind of made sense.
Did you wake immediately from those, or was there dream after being killed in the dream?
Both,
Okay.
depending. Yeah, there was one where I got killed right at the beginning of the dream. And so there was an earthquake at San Francisco State University, and I was in the student union,
Mm-hmm.
which is a concrete building, and it cracked and collapsed and killed me and a lot of other people. And we all had to go into the basement of the student union, which didn't have a basement,
Mm-hmm.
to stay there then, because we were dead.
Hmm.
We couldn't go out in the daylight, and we couldn't interact with anybody who was alive, but we were still, for all purposes, alive. We just had to stay down there because we were dead.
Hmm.
And some people were trying to figure out what they could do other than hang out under the student union. And so at night, they would go out and explore.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally went with one of these exploring groups, and we walked to the Pacific Ocean, to a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Big, bright, full moon, beautiful. And I dived because we were going to live under the sea, since we didn't need to breathe anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, as I was diving, that the salt water of the ocean was going to be incredibly caustic to me because I was dead.
Mm.
And it was going to burn me alive. And then I woke up.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah. So sort of double death.
Yes.
That's one that stuck with me.
Yeah.
But I woke up before I hit the water.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
The realization of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. The only times that I can remember ever dying in my dreams, I've always been shot.
I've been stabbed. I've been drowned. But I now that I think about it, I don't think I've been shot.
Hmm. Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're in New Mexico, which is one of the most heavily armed states in the country.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but unless you're in like the urban areas, there isn't actually statistically the gun violence is not.
Oh no, I'm not saying the gun violence.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're all everybody. I grew up around guns.
Yeah.
But no, it's always been. I think it was more influenced actually by seeing TV with movie type of. Yeah, it would be really interesting to look into where that is, but that's certainly, something I grew up around, and it's not. It's kind of it's a normal part of life in the rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I've never had any the roof collapsing on me or
Well, I'm in earthquake country, of course.
Yeah.
So that's something we think about.
Yeah.
Whenever the earth shakes, we think about the roof coming down on us.
Right. Well, and I guess that makes sense that different people are going to. I've also never had dreams about a boating accident. Not something we do a lot of out here. I don't have a lot of boating experience,
but open water.
But somebody who grew up on the coast and went sailing every weekend during their childhood, maybe they'd have a different experience with that.
Right.
So plenty of flying dreams, though.
Me too. A lot of flying dreams. Yeah, lucid flying dreams are my favorite, because then you can go where you want to go. Right? It's really fun.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this lucid.
Why don't you define that for folks first?
Sure. So a lucid dream is when you are aware that you are dreaming and you're still dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's different levels. You can be lucid, but not be consciously influencing what's happening. But you can also be lucid and be influencing what's happening. So a lot of times when people say lucid, they mean you can control your dreams, but technically it is just being lucid, being aware of that dream. So there's different levels to that.
Yeah, the awareness is necessary. You have to be aware that you're dreaming in order to be lucid dreaming. The
Right.
degree of agency that you have may vary.
Right. So, and this is something that people can just naturally do. It's also something that you can learn and train yourself to do.
Mm-hmm.
And people have different levels of comfort with that and techniques for trying to stay in the dream when you realize that you're dreaming. Because a lot of people struggle with, once they realize they are dreaming, they wake themselves up.
They wake up. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I've always been a lucid dreamer, and that's just something that's been part of my life my whole life. But when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I started to purposefully cultivate it and use it as a tool. And that was something that, I had interest in and was talking about that with my father, and he got me books and things like that. So a lot of what I know about for learning how to lucid dream just comes from having read those books, but I never taught myself to lucid dream. It was just something I always did, which I actually think, I don't know if it was something that I always did or if it was taught, because I do remember being very little and having nightmares, and the response that my parents would give me would be about how to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I was being chased by the monster, they'd say, okay, we'll go back to sleep. And then you tell the monster that this is your dream, not the monster's dream, and imagine something funny happening instead. Right? Like the monster's chasing you, but all of a sudden now you're jumping on the big balls and now you're giggling and laughing together. They were always very specific about, hey, when you change a dream, don't change it into something harmful. Right? Don't imagine, the monster getting hurt or blowing up or something like that. Make it something that is funny or twisted or like in a positive way, because the implication, they never said this straight out, but the implication was that the monster was me.
Right.
Right. All of that was just me. Whatever I'm doing in my mind is affecting me. So don't make it into like a hurting yourself. Make it into a transformational experience. So I remember doing that, my parents doing that, and I do that with my kids. Which is easy because we live in a 1-bedroom. So anytime they're having a nightmare, I know what they are. And so it's something that I think is just really helpful to never have the belief in the first place that you can't control your dreams or that you can't influence your dreams, because you can, right? We're taught that we can't. And the media around it and all of that, it's like, oh no, you don't influence, you don't have control over it, but you do, right? Yeah. But do you always want to is a very, very different question.
Right.
So for me, the dreams that most of my dreams, I choose to not be lucid in, because I don't feel as rested from them. So I'll be going to sleep and I'll decide, am I going to be lucid or not? I'll realize I'm dreaming and go, okay, so let go. I literally tell myself, let go, and just let the dream happen and let go of that. The lucidness. Yeah. But when I do lucid, I do a lot of work when I need to in that dream state. Is a really powerful state to go into. I will work through problems that I'm having. I'll do actual ritual in that state, and I actually do a lot of work in that state too. So I'm trying to take a whole bunch of information and construct a lecture of how do I take these complex ideas and put them together. Anytime I need something that's creative but builds it. So I teach a bunch of classes and I need to build a class. I'll go to sleep and then work on the actual outline and structure in the dream state, and then wake up and I'll write it down immediately and I've got the structure.
Mhm.
But if I do that too much, I don't rest. So
Right.
it's a, you're not, I don't know what's going on a physical level there, but I do not feel as rested when I lucid dream as when I just let myself dream.
Yeah, I don't either. Lucid dreaming feels like effort
Mm-hmm.
to me, some of which is some amount of effort to maintain the dream state,
Mm-hmm.
and some of which is just to, I have to pay attention, I have to make decisions, I have to do all that kind of stuff. So yes, my experience as well is that a lucid dream is not as restful.
Yeah.
I also do lucid dreaming. It's relatively rare because I'm usually just not aware of my dreams, but not infrequently with the dreams that are really impactful for me. I will realize, I'm trying to read something and it's gibberish, and oh, I'm dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Or something happens that's impossible. Well, you know, being a naturalistic pagan, when something that's physically impossible happens, I go, I think I'm dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of fun in lucid dreaming. I don't really use it for ritual work or even for, I suppose I should, given that it's kind of down there in the subconscious. But mostly I just use it to have the one thing that I do that is kind of self-referential is I like to go and look in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't really describe what I've seen, but it hasn't been my face. It's
Yeah.
been, deeper layers of who I am. So that's a very powerful exercise. If you find yourself in a dream and you wake up, go in the bathroom and look in the mirror.
Or pull out the hand mirror that you happen to have in your pocket because it's your
Right.
dream.
Yeah. Pockets in dreams are like pockets in cartoons. You can pull anything out of them.
They're bigger on the inside. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and the looking in a mirror, that's one where when people are trying to develop to be able to wake up in their dream, that's a classic one, is to check whether you're dreaming or not, look in a mirror. Another
Mhm.
one is to look at writing,
Mhm.
look away, look back at the writing. Has it changed? And so we tend to do in our dreams the things that we do when we're awake. So if you have a habit in your like waking life where you always push the glasses up on your nose, or you have a habit where you look at your phone or your watch, or you think something throughout the day, those are things that you'll tend to repeat in the dream state. And so one of the things that people can do to try and learn to lucid dream is to ask yourself throughout the day, am I dreaming? And check if you're dreaming. But you have to actually do the things so that you repeat that in your dream.
Mhm.
Because if it's not actually a habit, you won't actually do it in your dream.
Right.
But yeah, you check and you go, okay, I look at my watch, and right now I look at my watch and there's actually the time on it. I look back and it's the same time. So I go, yeah, I'm awake, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But then once you're in the dream state, you mentioned this maintaining yourself in the dream is the next challenge, right? Is to
Yes.
not wake up immediately. For me, it feels like when I start to wake up, it feels like I'm almost being pulled backwards through like a gel. The image that I think of is if you've ever watched Stargate, there was
Mhm.
a movie for it and there was a delightfully campy TV show for a while. Whenever they
Mhm.
go through the Stargate is going
Oh,
through
right.
this like this jelly plasma thing. I always feel like I'm getting pulled back through that. And I feel like I can't breathe when I'm traveling through that. But if I can just pull
Mm.
myself back in, I just like step back into it, that I stay in the dream state. But if I let myself go back all the way through, the moment I get through that jelly, I'm awake. But I can go, okay, I'm going to go right back to the same spot in that dream. That dream's still there. As long as I don't fully get up, right? If I have to get up and go do something in the house, the
Then it
cat
can be
broke something on
gone.
the table, or I get up to go use the restroom like that, then I've left the dream. But if I haven't
Uh-huh.
gone that far from it, I can go right back to the same spot.
Right. Right. Well, that's cool. My feeling about being pulled out of the dream is it's much more vertical than it is horizontal.
Hmm.
I feel like going deeper into the dream is literally sinking, going lower, whereas I feel like it's it's like scuba diving in that it's about buoyancy.
Hmm.
And your natural buoyancy is to go back up and come out of the dream.
Hmm.
And so the challenge becomes to make the motions or do whatever the effort is to stay down.
Interesting.
So that's more of how I experience it. Scuba diving is very dreamlike anyway. Just being down there, or skin diving, snorkeling, same
Hmm.
kind of thing. Being down there with all those fish and stuff in that very slow moving, languid environment because of the density of the water is very
Hmm.
dreamlike to me.
And your body being able to move in ways that you couldn't on dry land,
Right. And
right?
it's
You
a
could
full
just sort
body
of twist around and move, and yeah.
and it's a full body sensation.
Hmm.
So, which is, we tend to just sort of experience with our hands and faces, and not have the rest of our bodies engaged so much. Yeah, so that's that's a cool thing that I enjoy doing. The but and this struggle to stay down
Hmm.
happens when I realize that I'm dreaming.
Yeah.
That's the crisis point where it arises.
Hmm.
And then I either win or lose. I either stay down or I don't.
Hmm.
But if I do, then I feel I have a lot of freedom to just explore and to do things, to fly and to jump off high buildings because I'm afraid of heights and stuff like that. So I have a catalog of many impossible experiences that I've had that are as vivid in my memory as my actual memories.
Right. Well, those are actual memories, but
Right.
they aren't memories of things that you physically did. They're memories of things that your brain still thinks you did.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's amazing how powerful the feelings can be. I mean, probably most of you have experienced. Have you ever had a fight with somebody in your dream and then woken up and you're still mad at them and you know that they didn't really say the thing, but you still
Yes.
feel it. You're still
Right.
so mad at them.
Right.
And it's like they would have never done that thing, whatever it was, ever,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
but you still experienced that. I think that's just so fascinating with dreams, and I hope we get to learn more about why our brains do that.
Yeah, that's the big question to me. The fact is we do it. There's a lot of descriptive literature about what it is and kind of patterns of how it works. But the big question but why? What exactly are we accomplishing by doing this? Even though I know in my own personal life that I do accomplish things
Hmm.
in dreaming. I have experiences and I learn things.
As you're saying that, it makes me think about other places in our lives where we have tools that we use, like meditation, like
Mhm,
ritual. These are things that we have some insight into with science, but
mhm.
largely we really don't understand them. But we can still, even though we don't yet understand them on that level, we can still figure out how to use them because they still exist. And
Sure.
that's where the art part, that's where the craft part comes in. These are
Well,
tools that we're using,
I
even though we
think of
don't
it
know
as
why. Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry to
Go, no,
interrupt you.
please.
Well, I think of it as rather like the domestication of fire. We
Mhm.
didn't understand what fire really was for hundreds of thousands of years, but we were
Right.
still using it. We were making it and we were transmitting it and we were using it to cook our food and to illuminate our dwellings and to, create heat in the wintertime and all kinds of stuff. And I've heard it said that the most mysterious and complex thing that humanity has ever discovered is the human brain. There are the range of possible manifestations of behavior that come out of human brains is just astounding.
Right.
And we don't understand very much about it at all because it's very hard to observe it while it's working.
Yeah.
And to translate the experience of it working, which is consciousness, into some kind of objective data about what that process is. So, yeah, I mean, I believe we will learn more about that. I don't know that it'll ever be completely done and dusted, but
I don't think science works that way, frankly. I think that the
I
more
don't
we
think
know,
so.
the more questions we have, and that is beautiful. That is just
Yes,
amazing.
yes. About simple things like how fire works. You know, we can get pretty good answers that don't leave a lot of questions left.
On a certain scale, right?
Well, yeah.
Right? We can go, okay, so we're talking about the splitting of molecules and the recombination of, but let's start talking about, okay, but why were those molecules bonded to each other in the first place?
Right.
What are they
And
made of?
what is a molecule?
Yeah.
And what's that made of? And then what are
Mhm.
those made of? And then what are those made of?
Right? And why? Okay, so why? And so it's doing this because of this particular force. Why does that force exist? Is that force connected to something else? It just keeps going and going.
Sure.
And maybe there's a simple answer to all of it, but I think we're a ways away from finding that, if it
Well,
exists.
certainly all the quantum stuff, there's plenty of questions left. Plenty.
Yeah.
Vast acreage of unknowns. But as you say, within a given scale context, you can understand how something works.
Right.
And I doubt that we will understand why the human brain works, even at its own scale. Much less at deeper levels. But even at its own scale, there's just, when you have trillions of informational connections working at incredibly fast speeds, I just think it's going to be impossible to ever chase those things down.
Yeah. Well, and each one being, as far as we know, very different. The way
Yes.
that which connections my brain makes versus your brain.
Well, right. I'm just talking
different.
about one brain. I'm not talking about brains in general. I'm just talking about one brain.
But there are things that we have learned, right? Like learning about
Sure.
the different, kinds of connections and neurotransmitters and which particular elements do we use in order, all of that stuff.
Sure.
We've made
and
so much
which
progress.
parts of the brain tend to be associated with particular senses or particular processes.
Oh, but then they go and change on us.
Oh, I know.
Because that's what we find that's amazing when, and not in all the cases, but there's many cases where we found when someone's had brain damage in one area, and then another part of the brain starts to perform the function that usually would have been in that part of the brain. And
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I read a fascinating article by a woman. God, where was this? The Atlantic, I think. And she literally has half of a brain.
Okay.
It was discovered in adulthood when she had an MRI that.
So she was born this way.
She was born this way.
Okay.
And she's of perfectly normal intelligence. She has an absolutely ordinary life.
Okay.
But half of her brain never developed.
What's filling in the physical space where the other half would be? Okay.
Fluid. Yeah. Cerebrospinal fluid.
Yeah. Wow.
Pretty
I'm
awesome,
sure she's pretty popular now.
Yeah.
Lots
of studies and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, how interesting.
And I mean, that's fully coordinating both sides of her body. That's, doing everything that a brain does, and it's just doing it with half as much matter.
Wow. Have they checked in with siblings to see if that is?
I don't remember, honestly. It was a while back, but it was a pretty wild article. I should try to find it.
Yeah, that's interesting. This stuff is fun.
It is.
Right?
It is. And one of the places where we encounter the mysteries about the brain is in dreaming. because dreaming is a mysterious process. Why am I being shown these images? Why am I
showing myself?
Yeah, why am I finding myself immersed in, these particular situations and these particular, colors and objects and characters and plot lines and, what is all that about?
And why are those two people actually one person? I don't know how this happens for you, but sometimes characters in my dream are not really, they're rarely one person. There's
Ah,
several different people at once.
I don't have that at all.
No, you'll have it.
No.
There'll be someone. Okay, for me,
Yeah.
they will be several different people, and sometimes I'll think about. So why was it that so and so was also so and so?
Hmm.
Like, what overlap am I seeing there, or did it not really matter for the dream
And
who the other person was?
these are recognizable people from your life, or they are characters that were created in the dream?
Well, people from my life, but also movie characters and
Okay.
think characters, either a human, there's somebody, whether
Mhm.
that somebody is a real person or not, right? Like there, for instance, is making up, there could be Santa, right? Like
Right.
there's, never met Santa. There's, as far as I know, no real Santa, but Santa can show up in my dream, and Santa can also be my second grade teacher at the same time in my, but that's just, why,
Yeah.
right? That's one of those
Right.
interesting things to think about. There's got to be some connection there, or
Right.
maybe not. But me trying to figure out what that connection is might reveal to me something about my feelings about my second grade teacher, or why am I thinking
Right.
about her right now?
Right.
How many decades later?
Right.
So
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. And I'm sure that our listeners have a very broad range of different kinds of experiences as well. If you want to email us at thewonderpodcastQs@gmail.com, or comment on this
if you're listening to it
podcast,
online,
if you're listening to it
well,
on
YouTube,
YouTube,
yeah.
you can go ahead and comment there. What was your most vivid dreaming experience? What's been your most amazing experience in the dreaming realm? Because it really is a pretty remarkable thing that we do. We spend a lot of our time asleep,
Yeah.
and
It's glorious. Love it.
I don't spend as much time asleep as I wish I did.
Well, and that's one that I have looked into the research on, which is very distressing about the sleep deprivation, especially in the United States. Very worrisome with teenagers in terms of what's happening with their sleep deprivation.
My local school districts here just made a ruling that they were not going to start classes until, I think, 8:30 in the morning, maybe 9.
Oh, good.
Because classes had been starting at 7:30, and it's
Yeah.
just, that's not good for a developing brain.
It isn't. Well, and this is one area where there's research as well into chronotypes. And this seems to be pretty universal across cultures, that that teenagers will naturally stay up later and wake up later. That seems to be, that's not just coming from like our cultural stereotypes, that seems to be across cultures. And getting less sleep than we need has a negative impact on so many different levels for us, and it increases risk of all kinds of things. So I think it's ridiculous to be making teenagers get up and being sleep deprived because of that. And I know we can go, oh, we're supposed to be teaching them, responsibility and all of that. And it's like, not at the cost of their physical and emotional well-being and their ability to learn, because you're not going to learn as well when you're sleep deprived.
Right.
And what are we teaching them? That them fitting into these particular hours that we've for some reason chosen, that probably have more to do with like the hours of operation of factories, we care more about that than their well-being. I don't know.
Yes.
There's my soapbox. Sorry, all.
Well, I don't disagree with any of it.
So
certainly,
frankly, 8:30 is still pretty early for a teenager.
I'm just glad that some of the more progressive districts are starting to pay attention to this research and to think about. And parents complain because parents want the childcare, right? They want to get out of the house in time to get to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just the whole system is interconnected levels of dysfunction.
Yeah. That's a whole nother area.
It is. And it's not a particularly cheery area. So let's move on.
We should. Yes. Now, actually, there was a very cheery, exciting thing that you wanted to announce.
Yes, we've talked about this before, but tickets for the Atheopagan Web Weaving Online Conference, which will be June 4th of this year, the tickets will go on sale next Saturday, April 1st. Tickets are from $10 to $50. There are scholarship tickets for nothing to spend anything. Nobody's turned away for lack of funds. We're encouraging giving at least 20 so that we can cover the expenses of the conference. But you can get information about it at apsociety.org/AWW2023. And we'll put that in the
show notes,
in the podcast notes. And you can download the program there and look at offerings of workshops and activities and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a really great opportunity to see other people that are following these paths and exchange information and learn stuff. So I really hope you'll take a look and consider coming.
And both of us are doing workshops. So
that's right. I'm doing one on the clerical path, and you're doing one for kids, right?
I am. Yeah, I'm going to do a kids circle. So
that's great. Yeah, exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's 2 months away, but tickets will go on sale next week, and you can look at the program. It's downloadable in either PDF or format. You can look at those.
And it does always help us to get people to know ahead of time how many people to be expecting.
That's right. If all the registration comes in at the last minute, it could be complicated for us. Our current Zoom account, this will be done over Zoom. Our current Zoom account allows 100 attendees. If we have 98 attendees 3 days before the event, and then another 300 people register in those last couple of days, we're going to have to call Zoom up and more capacity and, all that kind of stuff.
Right. So we'd of course love to have as many people as want.
Tickets early.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We would be delighted, arrange for more seats with Zoom, but it would be a lot better if we could do that a week in advance rather than 2 days in advance. So get your tickets early.
Yeah. And we'll see you there. And as always, thanks for hanging out with us on today's episode, and we'll see you next week.
Have a wonderful